Some of the best minds in the world bringing you some of the best knowledge on TRS Clips. So I was listening to this amazing podcast with someone called Randall Carlson. He was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I highly recommend that listeners go check out all of Randall Carlson's episodes. His subject is ancient history before we learned how to write.
Right.
Now, he spoke about how roughly 2 lakh years ago, the first Homo sapien had arrived. So if you took that particular Homo sapien and put normal clothes on that person and made them walk around, you wouldn't even come to know that it's someone from ancient history. They look just like us.
Right.
But our written records can only trace back up to about 10,000 years ago.
Yes.
I'd probably say around 10,000 BC, because now we know that the Rig Veda is written roughly at about that time.
Right.
So lots of people consider the Rig Veda the oldest text in the world.
Yes.
Would I be right in saying that?
Definitely.
Okay. And would you say 10,000 BC is roughly the mark?
So, some verses that mention some astrological conjunctions, etc., they can be traced to around that time.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, although the Rig Veda wasn't written down for the longest time, it was passed orally. Most of scriptures were passed down orally through generations, and then they were written down. So it would not be correct to say that it was written down at that time. It was definitely composed much, much earlier. And some of the verses do mention some astral conjunctions that correspond to roughly around that period.
Okay. What I also want to highlight here is when you do 2 lakh minus 12,000, because 10,000 BC was 12,000 years ago, you have 1,88,000 years of human history, which we know very less about.
Yes.
Because over that kind of a time period, even bones degrade.
Definitely.
Even plastic, which we know today, would degrade in like 2,000 to 3,000 years.
Right.
All the plastic that we know. So even if some human civilization had created plastic way before us, we don't have a trace of that.
True.
The only thing that could survive 1,88,000 years and probably meteor showers and ice ages and natural calamities is rock formations or stones, like the pyramids would have survived, or just anything made out of rock.
Yes.
Which is why we have elements from the Stone Age which are still prevalent.
True.
So we kind of know what was happening a little bit before, say, 2 lakh years ago.
Right.
And then from this period of 2 lakh years to about 10,000 BC, we don't know what happened.
True.
Now, parallelly, when I'm a nice Hindu boy and I study the Vishnupuranas and I study the 10 avatars, 1,88,000 years is a long enough time for 9 avatars to have happened, according to me.
Right.
When was Buddha, which is the last mentioned avatar, when did he exist?
So
roughly?
there's a bit of controversy about that as well, but most scholars say around between 500 to 600 BC.
Okay, which is fairly recent.
Which is fairly recent. And that's fine because, Buddha was supposed to have come down in Kali Yuga, So, and Kali Yuga is what started around 3102 BC according to Aryabhatta. So,
and which also corresponds with Krishna's death, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So it was only after Krishna left this planet that Kali could begin his reign. And Kali, because you were talking about Satan earlier, Kali is the closest Hindu counterpart that you can find to Satan. Because Kali is supposed to live in 4 places, right? And one is where there's alcohol consumed. One is where there's illicit sex, maybe prostitution, where there is gold, money, materialism, gambling dens. So, these are the kind of places where Kali is supposed to thrive. So, this is the closest you can come to the concept of Satan in Hinduism.
Again, it makes me go back to that thing about Kali's present within all of us.
Right.
It's just that it's probably elevated in these 4 places.
Yes. Because these 4 places they tend to bring out the worst in you. In a gambling den, you're frustrated, you're angry if you're losing, right? The anger, in a different place, in a tavern where you're drinking, where alcohol is being served, you kind of lose your ability to control yourself. The faculties are inhibited. Inhibition is inhibited, basically, right? You become more free. And you tend to act out on those tendencies that are coming in your mind. So a lot of these places, Kali rules because of your baser instincts becoming more prominent. And that's what a devil or Satan is supposed to do, right? He's supposed to turn you into a bad person. And that is exactly what Kali is doing here. So coming from a perspective of history, there's a huge period that is missing because of the ice ages also. So there's a very long ice age, which started around 1.5 lakh years ago. It lasted till about 10,000 years ago, 10,000 BC, roughly, I think. So there is a lot that could have got covered or buried under the snow.
Which is what, there's another historian called Graham Hancock, and his life's entire mission is uncovering aspects of different world cultures that the world has forgotten.
Yes.
For example, in India, he is doing a lot of deep sea diving right outside Tamil Nadu and the coasts of India generally to find out basically lost cities.
Definitely.
Because technically in an ice age, what happens? Massive ice glaciers get formed all over the world.
Yes.
For ice to get formed, you need water. But there's a limited amount of water on the earth. Where's the water coming from? It's probably coming from the oceans. Which freeze out, become huge glaciers. So that effectively means water levels go down.
Sea levels, go down.
Over tens of thousands of years. And then you have an opportunity to create cities where today oceans exist.
Exactly. That's why all over the world, across the populated regions, if you do research in any of the bays or coastlines where there is still a lot of population abiding, you find a lot of excavations, you find a lot of remnants of the past. It's just that we still haven't explored. In India, I don't know why, for what reason, we stopped the exploration, after the discovery of Dwarka. Even that wasn't fully explored, I feel. And there is a lot more that can be done. So Graham Hancock did do a lot of good work in finding out some of these, lost arcs of civilization, along our coast. But that being said, there's also an evolution in the mindset of humanity. When we're talking about the early human beings 2 lakh years ago, they would not probably think the way we do. Right? I think, for the early man, it was a struggle to survive in a harsh environment. And when the ice ages happened, a major chunk of humanity vanished. And it was only in the tropics, which is, maybe parts of Middle East, Africa, India, tropical regions where humanity had reached by that time.
Near the Aztec and Mayan civilizations also.
Yeah, that happened quite late, actually. Aztec and Mayan civilizations, humanity, I think the last episode we spoke about the movement of populations across the Bering Strait into the Americas, which happened very, very late. Majorly, the humanity was concentrated in this part of the world.
This is Afro-Asia.
And even here, it was the tropical zones which had been inhabited. So there are genetic studies that show the original aborigines of Australia are connected to the people living in Andamans. And, so some people must have taken the sea route and some people went through the land. And then the ice ages happened. So people were stuck wherever they were. So most of the development happened only in these regions. The rest of the world was inhabited by living beings, but not Homo sapiens. In Europe, there were the Neanderthals. There were other species all over the globe.
I think Denisovan was in Asia.
Yes.
Russia and like Japan and these places.
Yes. And here in India also, there have been different species, sort of subspecies which were discovered, the Ramapithecus and Shivapithecus.
Wow,
which were
really?
discovered. Yeah. They've been named after Indian gods, but there are species that were discovered in the Shivalik Hills, in Nepal.
Which are cousins of Homo sapiens?
Yes.
Wow.
So they were definitely hominids. They're called hominids. There were definitely hominids here. There's evidence of tools, ancient tools being used right from there's a Soan Valley, there's a region of Pakistan, India, Nepal. In Rajasthan, there have been discoveries of stone tools, etc. So, and of course, in the central part of the country where it is postulated that most of the migrations from Africa into India were located around the center, probably because they came through the sea. And the central region had the oldest inhabitants of this continent, of the subcontinent.
The central region.
Central region of India.
Like Madhya Pradesh.
Madhya Pradesh. So most of the tribals that you find, the most ancient tribes, the Gonds and the other tribes in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, they are all centered around that region, right?
Gotcha.
And these people were probably the original inhabitants of this country. That is not to say that there was a migration of Aryans or there was a migration of Dravidians. No, they moved into different parts of the country. They moved to the north, they moved to the south, they developed different characteristics. There was intermingling of populations, of course, of successive batches coming out of Africa, etc. A lot could have happened. But it is postulated that the central region of the country had the oldest inhabitants.
Speaking about this central region of India, of course, we've covered a lot of aspects of the same concept with Abhijit Chavda. And he talks about how very likely during the Ice Age, because it was this one strip of land that was inhabited, culture had probably developed here.
Yes.
And once the earth started warming up in its most recent warming up phase, because even warming up and cooling down happens cyclically. In its most recent warming up phase, people moved from here towards parts of Europe.
Right.
And that's why you see so many parallels between Greek culture, Roman culture, the ancient culture of Syria, which I feel again is an offshoot of ancient Hindu culture.
Yes.
And the same could be said about the Southeast as well. It's because most of the human population was centered around this region.
Yes.
I think in the last podcast, we spoke about all the parallels between Zoroastrianism and Hinduism. It could have been an offshoot of the same seed religion.
Right.
We don't have to say, oh, this one came first or that one came first.
Yes.
It's probably some third thing that came first, out of which we are both offshoots.
So, Ranveer, you're very right. A lot of Western scholars tend to start with the premise that, civilization moved into India. But the genetic studies have proved otherwise, that people moved out of India, So, it's counterintuitive to say that, while people moved out, civilization moved in. Doesn't really make any logical sense, right? So it has to be, and our Purans actually talk about people moving out. There's a story of a king called Yayati, and Yayati had 5 sons. And it's a very interesting story where, this king Yayati, he did not want to relinquish his throne, right? And he did not, even though he had 5 very able sons, he did not want to let go of the pleasures that come with being a king, right? The luxuries and the pleasures that come with being a king. So he asks one of his sons to exchange their youth with him. Okay. So most of his sons refuse. They're like, you have lived your life. It's our time. You should relinquish the throne, go to the forest, take sannyas and give it to us, right? The throne. So none of them agree except one. And that kid is the youngest. And he's ultimately made the king later on, because Yayati is very happy with his sense of sacrifice, that he's ready to sacrifice his life for the sake of his father. And the other 4 are banished. And they move out in different directions. So the story says that some of them actually move to the west. So Anu, Dhruyu, they moved towards the west, I think, if I remember correctly. There was some Turvasha, I think, moved towards the south. There was another, Yayati moved towards, Yadu moved towards the west. So you have Yadavs centered around the western region. And Puru remain in the center. So that's where the kingdoms of Hastinapur, etc., they came up later. So, and one of the sons moved towards the eastern direction. So there is a Puranic legend which tells us that people did move out. They did take this civilization out of our borders, across our borders. And even in later literature, you see the term called Yavanas. So Yavana refers to Greeks in the historical times. When Alexander came, Yavana used to refer to a Greek. And Yavana is actually derived from Anu. So Anu's descendants were the Anavs, which probably became Yavanas later. So these were the people who moved in a western direction. There's a very clear-cut, story mentioned in our Purans. And even otherwise, if you see the scriptures, the geographical descriptions in the Rigveda, the oldest parts of Rigveda talk about the rivers around the Indian subcontinent. They don't really talk about rivers in the west. And as you move to the later aspects of Rigveda or later parts of Rigveda, you start seeing preponderance of western rivers.
Wow.
So it's a very interesting study, and I don't know why people like to keep flogging a dead horse and again keep talking about the same theory which has no basis. You're
talking about the Aryan invasion.
The Aryan invasion theory. It has no basis, no logic.
It's got geopolitical significance.
Exactly. That's it. And it serves them to keep the theory alive. And of course, even in India, there is a sort of a political movement against, the Aryan and Dravidian divide. So there is there's a geopolitical strategy to it, but otherwise it doesn't make sense, And yeah.
Like speaking about this whole four-direction concept, it's there in the Ramayana as well. When Ram takes the help of Sugriv, who's supposed to be the king of the Vanaras or the monkeys.
Yes.
I mean, that's what people understand the word Vanaras as.
Yes.
So they send 4 troops, one in each direction, and the one that goes towards the south finds Sita Ma in Lanka, which is, I think, headed by Hanuman. Yeah, obviously.
Yes.
Now, my question here is, we mentioned Denisovans and Neanderthals, and I'm saying this very respectfully. Could there have been a possibility that the Vanaras that we read about was some sort of cousin of the Homo sapien?
Very likely.
Okay.
It's a definite possibility. I think it will be foolish to refuse that it's a possibility even,
When do you think the Ramayana would have happened?
Well, according to scriptures, it was a really long time ago because it did not happen in this cycle. It happened in the 24th Mahayuga.
Which could have been when?
Millions of years ago, actually.
Millions of years ago.
So for us, currently we are in the 28th Mahayuga, 28th cycle. And Ramayana happened in the 24th Mahayuga. So there have been there have been a lot, there's been a long time,
If there's listeners listening to this with skeptical ears, what I also want to say is, human beings today are closer to Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the pyramids. That's what people don't understand about timelines and history.
Yes.
I don't know about millions of years ago, but I'm ready to believe at least 1 lakh.
Definitely.
Maybe 1.5 lakhs.
Yes. So the theory of yugas and, the duration of yugas is not very well understood even till now.
Okay.
Not a lot of people have been able to decipher it completely, including myself.
There's these micro schools in Hinduism which war against each other. And my opinion on the yugas is the ultimate.
Yes. And there's this whole theory of ascending and descending yugas, which actually does not find basis in scriptures. A lot of people do follow it or do believe in it, but none of the scriptures actually talk about an ascending or a descending yuga. It's a cycle. It's a continuous cycle. So whenever it happened, whether it was millions of years ago or thousands of years ago, the fact is that, there would be different species existing at that time, And I feel it's very, very likely.
I can't believe how much I'm quoting the Randall Carlson episode, but there was one more crazy factor that, it kind of goes in line with the things you're saying. Like, while we know that the presence of human beings has always been harmful towards all animals, like, so much of it is written in Sapiens as well. Like, wherever we went, we destroyed the animal kingdom of that place. We also need to keep in context that 99% of all animals that have ever existed have now gone extinct.
Yes.
What we know of as all the possible species in the world that are present today, they're 1% of whatever's existed on Earth.
Right.
And we don't even know what we don't know.
And same is true probably for other species also, because Homo sapiens was the smartest. We could have easily wiped out the others. And it is said that, there was definitely intermingling of the species where, Neanderthals, if I'm not mistaken, it's said that, the light eyes of colors, it's come down from Neanderthals in Europe, So
that there is Neanderthal blood in Caucasian humans of today.
Yes. So there was a definite intermingling. We have stories about, intermarriages of species between devas, asuras, between humans, manavs, apsaras, between vanars and, other species. So probably, these refer to different kinds of subspecies of humans that were existing at that time, which we haven't discovered or we haven't found the connection.
Yeah. It's like when you study the timeline of the Earth, which is billions of years old, you basically kind of look at yourself as just some sort of advanced fungus that's growing on this planet that's conducive to the growth of fungus.
Yes.
But anyway, go on.
So, no, that reminds me, in school and science, I remember, there was an analogy of if you plot the history of the Earth on a clock, human beings have appeared right, I think, at the last second of the clock striking 12.
Yeah.
So that's how young we are. And then we presume to believe that, we know everything that has happened on this planet.
Yeah. Just in the last 10 years, so much history has been disproven, be it Graham Hancock's work, stuff that Randall Carlson talks about, stuff that the internet and the podcasting cultures kind of uncovered. Like I learn so much every time I speak to you. Thanks for watching. Make sure you check out the entire episode and also check out this playlist that we've curated just for you.